Trita Parsi is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, and he joins us from Reston in Virginia. Great to have you with us. Why do you think Donald Trump and Marco Rubio are leaving the G7 early?
I think the administration is going for an effort to see if they can force an ultimatum on the Iranians, which is to essentially tell them that they have to go along with the zero enrichment agreement, unless, and if they say no, there will be massive bombings in which the U.S. itself will enter the war. However, I find it unlikely that the Iranians will accept that.
That was going to be my next question, whether this is something that the Iranians would agree to, because there have been overtures that we've seen through back channels from Iran that they are interested in de-escalation.
They certainly are interested in de-escalation. They were not the ones who escalated it. This is the Israelis who started this war. However, de-escalation and capitulation are two different things. From the Iranian perspective, if they agree to zero enrichment, they do not believe that the story will end there. They have clearly shown that they can hurt Israel through their missiles. The Israeli narrative is shifting from saying that the nuclear program is an existential threat to saying that the missiles are an existential threat. So even if they agree to zero enrichment, they believe the story will not be over, and there will likely be further Israeli action one way or another to target Iran because of its missile program. If the missile program then goes, then what does Iran have left as a deterrent and as a defense system? So I find it unlikely that the Iranians will go along with this, not because they're not hurting, not because this is not a very dangerous situation for them, but because there is no credibility that capitulation actually leads to an end to this.
But do you think that they will at least come to the negotiating table if the US says that it is willing to?
I think there are ways of agreeing to that. The thing that they are insisting on is that there has to be a stop in the Israeli bombardment of Iran, and Iran would stop bombing Israel, essentially a ceasefire for that to happen. I'm not so sure how strongly held their position is on that. Perhaps they can agree to talks regardless of whether the fighting continues.
And I guess the question then becomes whether US President Donald Trump has the leverage over Netanyahu to make him stop the attacks.
He certainly does. The United States has always had that leverage. I think it's a complete myth that is spread to say that the United States doesn't have the leverage. The question is if the cost of using the leverage politically for presidents is worth it. In most cases, we have seen them finding it more convenient not to put pressure on Israel because of other factors, because of the political cost. But it's not because of the lack of leverage.
But then is the appetite in the US for that leverage to be used, or is the overriding thought that this is something that the US should stand behind Israel wholeheartedly?
Depends on who you talk to, but if you talk to the core elements of Trump's base, the America First crowd, they didn't even want to see him go along with giving the Israelis a green or a yellow right to start this war in the first place. They're completely against it, and they're up in arms against it. And this is one of the challenges Trump faces here. If the Iranians say no, what is he going to do? Because if he starts that war, if he enters this war, the United States will also pay a very significant price. And his base is dead set against this. Part of the reason why they elected him is because they don't want to see any more wars or support for wars, whether it is Israel's war against Iran or whether it is Ukraine's defenses against Russia. So it is going to be very costly for him as well if he goes through with what appears to be the ultimatum that he's going to present the Iranians.
If we look at Iran and the attacks that are on Tehran and beyond, across the whole country, how protected do you believe the supreme leader is against a strike by the Israelis?
Well, we have seen that clearly the Israelis have both intelligence and capabilities to be able to target many of the leaders of Iran, and they already have. The reason why they didn't target Khamenei is unclear whether they couldn't or whether they didn't want to. There are good reasons to believe that the story that the Trump administration had said no to a targeting of Khamenei is true, because the Trump administration understands that Khamenei is actually one of the key factors as to why the Iranians have not gone for a bomb. There are plenty of people within the system, an increasing amount of people in the system, that actually wants to go for weaponization because of what the Israelis have done. But Khamenei has issued a fatwa against it. And if he is assassinated, the fatwa actually dies with him. So if you want a deal and you don't want the Iranians to go towards weaponization, the Trump administration appears to calculate that having Khamenei stay there is better than to have him be killed by the Israelis.
Trita Parsi, great to speak to you. Many thanks for taking the time to join us there from Virginia.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.